It's good to see everyone tonight. Tonight we have Shay and Spear. And remember, we're doing this little series of kind of going through the books of the Bible one at a time to encourage people to read the Bible. So tonight we're going to deal with the glorious book of the Song of Solomon. Not really a book that probably is first on a lot of people's lists of books of the Bible to read. Would you say, Shay?
Probably not.
Yeah. So what do you think about that, Spear?
Probably not going to be a lot I can add to that book. Not a real frequenter.
Okay, so let's just kind of jump into these questions and we'll go from there, okay?
Mhm.
So Sister Shay is going to read us the first question.
Who wrote the Song of Solomon and when was it written? Why is it sometimes called a Song of Songs? And could 1 Kings 4:32 add any insight to this?
Okay, so since Spear is going to read the passages, why don't you jump over to 1 Kings 4:32 and let's kind of answer the first part of it. So who do you suppose wrote the book of Song of Solomon?
I'm going to go with Solomon.
Good.
Got one anyway.
Yes. When would it have been written? Solomon actually didn't live to be that old, about 58. So kind of a lot happened in the life of a short time. And obviously if he wrote it sometime before his death, and I believe 931, I think that's the date, 971 to 931, a 40-year reign. So sometime before 930, the book of Solomon, the Song of Solomon, if he wrote it, clearly he had to write it. Now God can do anything, but there's no indication that he was ever raised from the dead to do anything. So I think that's what we would have to assume, that he did it at that time. So and then we have a passage to read? Does this add anything to it? So why don't you read that, Spear?
Okay, 1 Kings 4:32. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005.
So Solomon wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. We have one of his songs recorded, and what is the Song of Solomon that we have recorded? The Song of Solomon, right? Okay. We have one of Solomon's songs recorded out of 1,005. Busy little writer, huh?
Yes.
I mean,
It's his dad was busy fighting and building the empire, and Solomon is busy studying everything and writing all kinds of proverbs and songs.
and being a husband.
And being a husband, yes. Which is really what this book is about. Song of Solomon is really about him being a husband, not to 699 other wives and 300 concubines, but we'll get to that in just a moment. And but anyway, so Solomon wrote a lot. Clearly, he wrote a lot of songs. We really only have one of his songs actually recorded, and here it is in the Song of Solomon. So, any rate, that's Solomon, the dates, why it's called the Song of Solomon, because he wrote it. And as 4:32 of 1 Kings says, he wrote 1,005. We have one of those recorded. There's a lot that Solomon wrote that we do not have recorded. So, any rate. Okay, let's jump to the next question.
Is the Song of Solomon a collection of Solomon's songs, or is it one individual song?
So read your passage again in 1 Kings, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. He wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs.
Okay, now are a number of Solomon's proverbs recorded, or is it just one proverb?
Yes.
A number.
Yes, a
multiple
number.
ones, yes.
Hundreds and hundreds of the proverbs recorded. So is Song of Solomon, is it one song, one of his 1,005, or is it a compilation of a lot of songs?
I hope it's a compilation. If not, this is a long song.
It is one song.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's why they call it the Song of Songs.
Yes.
Because it means
yes.
like
yes.
the best one.
Very good.
Is that?
I'm afraid Spear's headed for a gold star again.
I had to go ahead and slip one in. Jay told me that when I came in today.
But that's why it is called Song of Songs, because it stands out apparently of all the songs. That's the only one we have written and I can't tell you why God had this one written. I do have some ideas though of all that were there, but yeah. So this is the one song that is written. So this is not a collection of a bunch of songs. It is one song. So it has one theme running through it. Okay, and so that's kind of, this isn't going to be like Proverbs getting a lot of different things and ideas together. This is going to be kind of coming back to one thought and one idea. So remember that. This is actually a very beautiful book. It's a fantastic book, as all the books of the Bible are. And it's sad that it's such a neglected book in a lot of ways. So, okay. Read the third question.
Who are the two main characters in this book? Who is the Shulamite maiden, and what is her relationship to Solomon?
Okay. Sometimes we write a question that gives us a strong hint. So in that question, if you had never heard it, if you've never read the Song of Solomon, and you had that question, and who are the two main characters? Okay, what two characters are mentioned in this question?
I think that one's for you, Spirit.
Is it? I'm gonna go with Solomon and the Shulamite woman, maiden.
Very good. Yeah, these are the main two characters in the book. And so, who is the Shulamite woman?
His lover friend.
Yeah, it's actually going to be his wife, and he is going to. The wedding is actually described in the book. It takes place and everything, and it's really quite an amazing. And Solomon here is apparently relatively young. Okay, and so the Shulamite maiden, we don't know. There's been a lot of speculation of who she is. She's from the city of Shunem. Who she is, and there are several people in the Bible from that city that are mentioned, and there are some possible candidates, but it's probably definitely best to leave this as unanswered, that we just don't know exactly who it was. I was trying to think of some of the candidates. I have to go back and review those again, but we don't know. But she's, this is who she is. She's from the city and the area of Shunem, which wasn't much to that town. So, at any rate.
So even outside of Scripture, in any of the history or recordings, the lady's name's never mentioned or known.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
I never picked up on that.
And so, and what is her relationship to Solomon?
Wife.
Wasn't it his first wife?
Yeah, first wife. And that's what's so so pure about this. If you wrote a book, about Solomon, give me the title of, and I'll catch you off guard, but give me a title for Solomon, his life.
Wisest man that ever lived.
Yep.
Busy.
Yeah, busy. Okay, I think that's very good. Busy, wisest man that ever lived.
Tired.
Tired, yeah. And I think mine would be something like missed opportunities, or perhaps kind of how did you blow it with such gifts? And so you're looking at Solomon and you're going, David gave you the kingdom. All of his life, David fought and built the kingdom. He gives it to him.
And God gave you wisdom.
God gave you wisdom. And all the material for building the temple is right there. And remember, he was really, God really singled him out when he asked for wisdom. He said, I'm a child, I need wisdom. He said, God was so pleased. He said, because you have done this, I will also give you riches and honor. So what does that tell us kind of about Solomon? Or what does Solomon tell us about human nature?
It's all vanity.
Yeah, it's very good, vanity, man. I've got to come back to Ecclesiastes. Good job. So yes, it is all vanity. But what does that say about our ability to bring our appetites in check? The ability to control ourselves, the ability to keep ourselves focused the right way, the ability to control the motives of our heart. What does the Bible? What does this tell us about that?
I know, drawing just from him, I mean, I would think he had it all. Anything his heart desired or money could buy or thought, and he, I felt like, took it to the limit,
Yeah.
and still never found what he was looking for. So if you could just read and believe that, then you've kind of already have the means to that end. Because okay, he tried it. This is what he learned from it. So I mean, like only a fool would do it again. But yet
So,
we do.
how about you, Shay? What does this tell us about our ability to control our old nature?
We don't have the ability.
Yeah,
It really is just a daily, moment to moment battle between our sinful nature and honoring God.
I think desire and pleasure
yeah,
too.
yeah.
I mean, he said in Ecclesiastes he didn't withhold anything from himself.
Do you think he had too much time on his hands?
Yes, I'm gonna go with yes.
I do think so, but
And the Bible doesn't say to that one way or
but
the other.
only 58 years. I mean,
Yeah.
he's tired, 700 wives or whatever, and
Right.
then 300 concubines. He's obviously not wasting a lot of time idly,
Yeah,
but I'm not
and-
sure he's channeling his energy
Yeah.
for God's glory,
Yeah.
for sure.
And one of the things he didn't, he clearly he had much wives and concubines. These, a lot of these marriages were arranged political marriages. So,
but
the
they
thing-
still take attention and time.
they did, they did, they did, and we will get into that in a moment of what that cost him. But it's the attention and time that is really very, very, very important. Okay. Read in Song of Solomon, chapter 2. Let's read chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. I think in your question it says Ecclesiastes, but it's Song of Solomon. Read chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. And here's the question we're asking: is the Shulamite maiden, is she, if you read this, would you think, is she kind of like, okay, like this sophisticated city girl, or is she kind of a country girl? Let's look at a few descriptions here, and you kind of tell me what you think. Read 2, 1 through 3 of Song of Solomon.
I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. Like a lily among the thorns, so is my darling among the maidens. Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. In his shade I took great delight and sat down, and his fruit was sweet to my taste.
Okay. Here he describes her. The description he's giving, does it seem like this is a sophisticated city girl, or she's kind of like in the rural environment?
Sounds like the rural environment to
Yeah.
me.
And what it was, apparently, Solomon had a whole lot of agricultural holdings, although I don't know that he's paid that much attention to his agricultural holdings. And but yeah, so this probably is an area where he had some of his agricultural holdings. And so, he somehow comes in contact with her, and it's really kind of, one of those, kind of Cinderella stories in a way, where the girl, the peasant girl, who his descriptions of her will be that she's probably stunningly beautiful. She becomes his wife.
Doesn't it talk about how dark her skin is because she had to work outside?
Yeah, it goes into description. It is apparent that she was outside. She was very good. Yeah. So you get.
I mean, no gold star, but I did pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, at least get the bronze. So anyway, and where's Solomon from? No, she's from Shunem. So where's Solomon from? He's in Jerusalem. He's in the capital, and so it's kind of one of these kind of things. I think that she's beautiful. Opposites attract. It's It's just kind of a neat story. Okay, let's go to 5. And I want to concentrate a little bit on 5, even beyond what the question says. So read number 5, if you would, Shay.
The Shulamite is apparently the first of Solomon's 700 wives and 300 concubines. How would his life have been different if this would have been his only wife? And so were the rest of his marriages and concubines sinful?
Okay, this is his first wife. So I ask you this question. How would the story, remember, kind of write a title for the life of Solomon. And wisest man that ever lived, which is true, but you're at the same time,
Yeah.
Spear, you're kind of like, okay,
I know.
if this is the best, it kind of maybe it's one of those things like, what is God telling us? If this is the best man can do, man really needs Jesus.
Yes.
Man really needs a Savior. But, okay. So, how would his life have been different if this would have been the only marriage, do you think, Shay?
Well, certainly I think he probably could have maybe used some of the wisdom that God gave him for good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems like he has to spend a lot of time seeing about all these people, all these women.
1,000 women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, you don't think there was any infighting, do you?
Well, and I mean, wouldn't you say that there are a lot of them that were arranged and all that? I don't know a lot about how that works.
We'll get that in a minute. There was
so-
tons of this was arranged. But still, you got to placate them. Still-
But it also speaks to the insatiable appetite of our sinful nature.
Yeah,
I mean,
our-
if she
our-
was so beautiful and
Yes.
wonderful and lily and, gorgeous lady, well, it didn't take him long to move on to
Slap
number
on
two.
number 2, yeah.
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 Yeah,
What do you
I'm
think
with
she felt like when all that was taking place?
I think betrayed, kind of. I mean, all this. I don't know if this was communicated back and forth, but then if it was, and then you
If you
start
Well, I think
stacking up, it's
well,
like,
it was
did he mean it?
more common too for people to have multiple wives and concubines. So
And it was, but if you read through this book, there's a time that she's waiting for him, she's looking for him,
yes,
she's
she's clearly infatuated with
yes,
him, and he is too,
and
but
he is
only
with
for
her.
a minute,
yeah,
Hot minute.
hot minute.
but it all why can't it be that way? I mean, why does it have to go so terribly bad?
Because we're relying on our feelings instead of
Yeah.
nurturing our relationship.
Disobedient. So, were all the other 699 wives and 300 concubines, were all the rest of them sinful then?
I think then it was like more common and allowed.
It was more
wasn't
common, but
It wasn't necessarily right.
no. And I don't mean that to be so crass of an answer, but God's ordained plan from the beginning was there to be one man and one woman.
Okay.
And even and this is a tough one to kind of wrap your head around, okay?
Right.
Because David with his 7 or 8 wives and concubines seems like nothing compared to Solomon, but yet okay, even that kind of is not good and stuff. So what is going on then if this is really not God's plan, but the plan really is one man and one woman? What is going on here? And what does this tell us?
If it's not God's plan, I'd say it was sin.
Yes,
It's wrong.
it is sin. It's wrong, and it always kind of winds up, kind of with problems. And so, what were the reasons for Solomon's downfall?
Adding wives, adding
One.
horses,
I think he was.
Right.
He was always.
You got
seeking-
one more: adding wives, adding horses,
and
gold, silver,
Yeah.
money.
I was
Okay.
going to say swords,
Okay,
but it's
okay.
some kind of
Nice.
metal.
Money. Why horses? Why was you never multiply horses?
Because of armies and
Yes, an army was built around horses, chariots and horsemen. I mean, you could win a lot of things if you could put chariots in the field, especially. And so, wives. So did Solomon? How many
he went against all three.
how many
of them.
horses did Solomon have?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't read it in a while.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to guess.
One account says 12,000.
Wow.
So that's putting a lot of horses together.
Yes.
And he got a lot of chariots, and he had chariot cities where he stored his horses and chariots. And so, so, so with money, well, money ought to speak for itself, the temptation there. Power, represented by military might,
And lust.
and then lust. So, the real problem with all these wives is the fact that a lot of these were arranged. So, let's say you had a wife from Edom, which he had. So, you get the god of Edom. You build a shrine to her, to him. And let's say you have a Philistine wife, okay? Well, then you've got to get a shrine to Dagon. And then you've got a Moabite wife. Well, you've got to build a shrine to Shemesh, the god of the Moabites. And you've got an Ammonite wife. Well, you've got to build a shrine to Moloch, the god of the Ammonites. And these all he did, and more and more and more. So you've got and then a Aramean wife. Well, you've got to build a wife to their god, and this all he did. So at any rate, Jerusalem becomes full of shrines to all these different wives that he had, and all these false gods that were worshipped. And so, where is how bad is Solomon going to become, spiritually speaking?
Bankrupt.
Yes, the Bible says, I think, the phrase that jumps out at you and said, okay, God is going to act. God is going to judge Solomon, is where the Bible says, and Solomon made his sons pass through fire. In other words, there were children that Solomon sired to some of these women that he burned as a sacrifice to these demonic spirits. And, so you're kind of sitting there going, okay, this, God has to judge. So again, how would he have been different had the Shunammite wife been his only wife?
You would like to think he would have stayed in tune with the Lord and walked with him and
Right.
never been led astray.
And the sexual sin and the lust is only part of it. Building all these foreign gods. And, Satan, well, let me ask this question. Say, okay, you're Satan. And I think we've had this discussion before. And not you are Satan. But
I can take the non-gold star.
they can't, well, not, the non-gold star is one thing, but anyway, okay. So you're Satan, and your job is to mess up a society. My job is to destroy every fabric of what God puts out in a society. And so I have the option of, let's say, drug abuse, alcohol, the option of, criminal activity, murder, hatred, all that, and then the option of using sexual perversion to destroy society. Which of those do you think would be the most effective in destroying a society?
I know the answer.
Yeah. It would clearly be, because sexual perversion is so widespread, not that many people will, and so.
And because you said it before, because the actual union between a man and a woman, and their union and the gift of their relationship given by God allows it to be good in that aspect, but then perverted.
Yes, because Satan creates nothing. He can only pervert what God has created. He doesn't have that power, that ability. Well, look at sexuality. For example, if you look at, say, 5 or 6 really big sexual sins, you can think of adultery, unfaithfulness in marriage, fornication, sexual activity before marriage. The only sexual activity that is sanctioned by God is really within the context of marriage. Okay, what does that say about even the churches today? How they're turning their backs on this. Okay, and then homosexuality. And then the whole movement of transgenderism. Let me ask you a question. Exactly where do we go next? You got to get creative to think of,
We talked about that today at work.
Yeah.
It's going to be,
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
that it's not even human.
Mm-hmm.
You can have some sort of identity outside of being a human.
Yeah, this is weird. This is.
Like I say, you can guarantee that it won't end there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
This ain't the end of
Right.
the extreme. I can tell you that.
But it's like, okay, But
And if we just used all that creativity for good and glorifying God,
well, I would say this. I think you're right, Spear, but it may be coming to an end in the fact that God's judgment is coming.
And that could be
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
I think evil knows no limits
Yes.
and no bounds.
Yeah, that's
You
exactly
never
true.
arrive at the evil end of the spectrum.
Yes. So I think we can say that, obviously, had this been the only marriage, it would have been a whole lot different. But again, go back to that whole point. If you wanted to pervert a society, pervert sexuality. Now, has sexuality been perverted in our society?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so what remains? And if because of this, because of Solomon's sin, and the fact that the sexuality led to the sexual perversion led to spiritual perversion, it always does. Always goes hand in hand. There's God rest his soul. Michael Guido used to say, "There's a fine line between spirituality and sexuality." And when I first heard that, I couldn't wrap my head around that, but now I kind of can, in that God instituted marriage and the expression of marriage, obviously, and then, which is very spiritual, and then the perversion of sexuality, which is very sinful. So there really kind of is a fine line. It took me a few years to wrap my head around that one. When I first heard it, I said, "Oh, okay, Michael, you're getting old." But it really is. There is really kind of, but that's where we are. So read the last question, Shay.
how is this book a picture of Christ in his relationship to the church?
Okay, how is this book a picture of Christ and his relationship with the church?
I mean, I was wondering the same thing about that question. I don't know.
Well, I think that the picture is that there's a sense in which Solomon and his bride are a type or a picture of Christ in relationship to the church, and that Solomon here probably represents Christ, and the Shunammite maiden represents the church as the bride of Christ, and that the analogy might end there with Solomon, because certainly he messed up this relationship. I don't know what she did, because we don't have that much of history about
Probably
her.
nothing.
Yes, probably nothing. The women, yes. But it is a picture, because and the whole thing. The reason we do this is because marriage itself is a picture of Christ and his relationship with the church.
Right, but I guess that I got lost in the whole 1,000 women.
Yeah, well, that's clearly a perversion. That is a sin. And the other thing that God is constantly mad at Israel for, he calls them, the nation of Israel, a prostitute, and he's not talking primarily sexual, but spiritual. They go after other
Dividing their
gods, defiling themselves,
worship.
and so sexuality is, it has to be kept under wrap. In terms of doing it the right way. And dear goodness, we have done anything but the right way with it. And but it is to be a picture of Christ and his relationship to the church. And that was to be a picture of it. And so, let me
It
ask you this.
shows how tolerance leads to complacency and moving away from what we're supposed to be.
Well, and aren't we hearing the word tolerant used a lot these days?
Yep.
I'm sure clearly Solomon loved God. He loved that relationship and wanted to honor God. But probably when you have 1,000 wives that all worship different things, he allowed that to happen to, appease them.
Yes.
Not necessarily for him to worship them.
So
But
let's,
in that, it allowed those to infiltrate into their society.
so let's end with this question, which is not a question thing, but it's the big question. Given that the wisest man in the world messed this up, the question is, as bad as he did, who can help us? Who can solve our problems?
Not us.
Yes.
Only the Lord. Yes.
Yes. And that's it's a picture of Christ in the sense that the only one that can rescue us is Jesus. And to say that we don't need help, come on. It's just nothing is more evident than the sinful nature of man and the fact that we are desperately wicked and we need God's help. And it's really pretty stunning that Solomon shows us, and we could talk of many, many examples, but we won't do that, of people that, I mean, if you look out the failure of even spiritual leaders is like, and everybody says, well, that's why I don't trust men, spiritual leaders or preachers or teachers or whatever. And I have a two-pronged rebuttal to that. Number one, you shouldn't trust. But number two, remember this, let every man be found a liar, but God is true. And so you have to remember those two things. But so only the Lord can help us. Any other thoughts, Shay or Spear?
That was good.
All right. Well, God bless. And remember, read the Bible. God bless and have a great evening.